Control A.5.3 addresses a timeless principle of internal control. No single person should have unchecked authority over an entire security-sensitive process. Segregation of duties prevents fraud, reduces the risk of undetected error, and limits the damage any single compromised account or malicious insider can cause. In this video, we explore what A.5.3 requires, the practical examples that illustrate the principle, and how organizations implement compensating controls when full segregation is not feasible. Let us start with the purpose of A.5.3 and the core principle that drives segregation of duties as a security and governance control. A.5.3 requires that conflicting duties and areas of responsibility are separated to reduce opportunities for unauthorized modification, misuse, or fraud. The core requirement of A.5.3 is simple in principle, but requires systematic design and practice. No individual should be able to initiate, execute, authorize, and review an entire security-sensitive process without oversight from at least one other person. This principle does not require large teams. Even a two-person check, where one person acts, segregation of duties operates most effectively when it is applied at the level of specific activities rather than entire roles. An organization should map security-sensitive processes, access provisioning, system changes, financial transactions, audit log management, and identify for each process which steps must be separated across different people. The initiator, the approver, and the reviewer should ideally be three distinct individuals with no hierarchical conflict of interest between them. Access management is one of the most important areas to apply A.5.3. The person who requests a new account should not be the same person who approves and creates it. The developer who writes code should not be the same person who deploys it to production. The system administrator who makes configuration changes should not be the same person who reviews the audit logs of those changes. These separations prevent both deliberate abuse and accidental misconfiguration from going unchecked. In smaller organizations, strict segregation of duties across all processes may be genuinely impractical. ISO 27001:2022 recognizes this and permits compensating controls where full segregation cannot be achieved. Effective compensating controls include management oversight of sensitive activities, mandatory dual authorization for high-risk actions, periodic independent review of transaction logs, and automated alerts for anomalous activity. The key requirement is that the compensating control is documented and provides a credible alternative check. Documentation of the segregation design, which duties are separated, which individuals or roles hold which responsibilities, and where exceptions exist with their compensating controls, is essential for audit purposes. Auditors will examine whether the organization has systematically applied the principle, not just stated it in policy. The documentation also enables the organization to identify gaps and design improvements as its processes and personnel change over time. For key concepts that help organizations understand and implement segregation of duties effectively. Conflicting duties are not always obvious without systematic analysis. An organization should map its critical processes, particularly those involving access to sensitive data, financial transactions, or system configuration, and identify at each step who can perform the activity and who can authorize it. When the same person appears in both columns, conflicting duties exist, and the design must be adjusted. Process mapping is the practical tool that makes conflicting duty identification systematic rather than ad hoc. The 4 Eyes principle is the most widely applied implementation of segregation of duties. It requires that any significant action, granting privileged access, approving a change to production systems, authorizing an exception to policy, must be seen and approved by a second person before it takes effect. In practice, this is implemented through workflow tools that enforce approval steps, through dual authorization requirements in access management systems, and through review processes that require sign-off from a manager or peer. Compensating controls must be genuinely effective to satisfy the spirit of A.5.3. An organization that states it cannot segregate duties in a particular process but provides no meaningful compensating control has not satisfied the standard. Effective compensating controls, management review of transaction logs, automated anomaly detection, periodic third-party audit of high-risk activities. Create independent assurance that the absence of segregation does not create an unchecked risk. Least privilege is the complementary principle to segregation of duties. Where segregation divides the authority to act across multiple people, least privilege limits each person's access to only what they need for their defined role. Together, these two principles dramatically reduce the attack surface available to both external attackers who compromise an account and internal actors who might seek to misuse their access. Both principles must be designed into the access management process from the outset. Let us look at concrete examples of where organizations must apply segregation of duties and what that separation looks like in practice. Practical examples of segregation of duties span development, operations, access management, and financial controls, wherever a single point of unchecked authority creates risk. The separation of development from deployment is one of the most widely recognized applications of A.5.3. When the same developer who writes code is also the one who promotes it to the production environment, there is no independent check on whether the code introduced any unintended or malicious changes. This separation is typically enforced through DevOps pipeline controls that require a different team member or an automated pipeline with enforced approval gates to authorize and perform production deployments. Access provisioning is a high-risk process that must involve multiple parties. The person requesting access should submit a formal request specifying the business need. A manager should approve the request, confirming that the access is appropriate for the person's role. A systems administrator should provision the account based on the approved request. No single person should be able to complete all three steps, because doing so removes any check on whether the access granted was appropriate, necessary, and authorized. System administrators who manage audit logs present a classic segregation challenge. If the same administrator who makes changes to a system is also responsible for reviewing the logs of that system, they have the ability to cover their tracks whether through negligence or intent. Organizations address this by routing audit logs to a separate, independently managed CM platform, assigning log review to a different team, or implementing technical controls that prevent log modification after the fact. Incident management requires segregation between those who respond to incidents and those who review whether the response was appropriate and complete. When a single analyst can both manage and close an incident without independent review, there is a risk that incidents are closed prematurely, that lessons are not extracted, or that the closure decision reflects convenience rather than genuine resolution. A second-level review before closure, by a manager, peer, or separate security operations function, creates the independent check that A.5.3 requires. Let us bring together the essential points from our exploration of control, A.5.3. To master all 93 Annex A controls and build a certification-ready ISMS, enroll in our complete ISO 27001-2022 Security Controls course on Udemy. We cover every control with practical implementation guidance and real-world examples. Enroll today. Thank you for watching. If you found this helpful, please like and subscribe. See you in the next video.